Hi, my name's Kristin, and I'm here helping my daughter with her channel on Ibogaine and her experiences with the wonderful uh, healing substance that is Ibogaine or Iboga. But today, what I'm going to be talking to you about is my personal experience doing Ibogaine after I witnessed Ibogaine save my daughter's life from meth addiction. Um, where to begin? I sought Ibogaine for PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and this being YouTube, I know I'm going to get some comments, I guess, regarding the fact that I have some unique features to my face. I do have unique features to my face and also to my body because I'm a survivor of torture. I'm not being overly dramatic. I'm a survivor of torture by international standards, by wartime standards, through egregious domestic abuse in my first marriage. I've been out for 20 years. I've done advocacy work for other survivors, and many other different things have flowered in my life because of that learning experience that I had. But for several years, that was my reality as I was living in egregious domestic abuse. And so the unique features to my face, some of those are from that experience. Also, I have a partially paralyzed hand. I don't know if you can see it, but this finger, the tendon was severed, like, yeah, get it in there, about there or so, there-ish. And I have some other stuff too. But at any rate, so I had done a lot of work through therapy and trying to eliminate my triggers, and I had really returned to a really high degree of functionality. But after my daughter's experience in Rosarito Beach, Mexico, being recovered through Ibogaine from her meth addiction, I learned more about it and learned that, in fact, it works for clinical depression, OCD, PTSD, different things like that. So I became very intrigued, and because I still had some symptoms in my life uh, from that time, I wanted to eliminate them if it was at all possible. Two, I wanted to experience what my daughter experienced. I wanted to experience Ibogaine because I was so grateful, having gone through, seeing my child almost die and then being, just such a wreck, and then coming back to us and being herself again, and, slowly becoming herself again. It's not instantaneous, but, just having her tell us about the amazing experience that she had. I wanted to know what that really was like. So what I did is I researched the most cost-effective ways that I could experience Ibogaine in the safest way possible. And I found that Minds Alive clinic in Durban, South Africa would do the treatment for $2,000 American, which is really cheap compared to some other places. Now, most Americans don't go to Minds Alive for Ibogaine for drug addiction because it involves a hellaciously long plane ride, and if you're coming down from heroin or meth or even alcohol or cocaine, it's really hard to be on a plane for a day to 2 days. Literally, that's what it took. But because I wasn't coming off of anything, I was able to take advantage of the low prices in South Africa and was able to take that long flight. And so for a total of about $4,000 including the airfare, and I did go during a peak time, I could have gotten it cheaper, I was able to experience Ibogaine for myself. So what happened was I did a little bit of talking with Dr. Anwar Jiwa, who runs Minds Alive, and kind of found out a little bit more about what I could expect and looked at the website and did all that, and I decided that it sounded like a great place for me because they have a very wellness oriented kind of alternative approach, which appeals to me because I'm an alternative person. I'm a neo-pagan minister and I'm a Reiki master teacher, and I'm one of those people. So I liked the idea that they offered Reiki, they offered yoga, they offered crystal healing and all that lovely stuff that makes me happy. So I did the deal and got on the plane and flew to Durban. And I was met by the lovely lady who does the crystal healing there, and she and her husband were gracious enough to drive me fairly late at night to the house where the treatments are done, the center. And the center in Durban is really lovely. Africa is way different than the U.S., obviously, so the entire terrain was a real experience for me, because I was like, wow, I'm not in Kansas anymore. but it's a beautiful home, and it's gated and very safe and everything. So I went in and I was greeted by one of the house managers, Malcolm, who's a bright spirit and lovely. He got me settled in, and I got a really nice room on the ground floor with my private bath, away from the men who were going to be treated during the time I was being treated, which I appreciated. I was given food. I was allowed to rest. I was allowed to just kind of relax, and then throughout the next 24 hours or so, the other people kind of trickled in who were going to be taking the treatment with me. And so there were a group of young men, and I was told that at this particular center, primarily they treat young men who are addicts. They don't get a lot of women. They don't get a lot of people who are getting Ibogaine for other reasons. There was another young woman who was there during my stay, but she stayed in her room and was not part of the general population, which we respected. But during this time, we went to see a doctor in downtown Durban, and that was really an experience. Being an American, it was really interesting to see the difference in culture and the way things are handled in that culture, because what I found was, although the house that I was in was gorgeous, downtown Durban is, looks pretty third worldy to people like me, and the office that the doctor was practicing out of was rustic, if you will. But the professionalism of the staff was amazing. The doctor was so personable and so kind, and the nurses were so kind, and they did all the different stress tests, and they tested my liver enzymes, and they tested my heart, and they tested a bunch of stuff. And at one point I had to give a urine sample, and so the nurse was leading me back to where I presumed the bathroom was, and it was so funny because I'm holding my little vial, and we walk out the back door into the alley, literally into the alley. And there's this little hut kind of thing with, like, the door was kind of hung funky, and she pointed to it and she's like, yeah, go in there, that's the bathroom. And I was like, okay. So I'm walking towards the shack, and there's like a chicken that comes running down the alley. It's like, was that a chicken? But bear with me here. I gave the sample. I go back and I talk with the doctor, and I was cleared medically, to have the Ibogaine treatment, and the rest of the men who were there with me were cleared, and one of them had some liver enzyme problems and whatnot. So we went back to the center. We were driven back by Kevin, who's the head nurse there. He was a wonderful human. And most of us tripped that evening on Ibogaine, and the one gentleman who had the liver enzyme problems, he ended up walking around with an IV for a day, and they had to kind of get him stabilized before he was safe to do Ibogaine. So I did my trip that evening, and the trip itself was really amazing. It's like nothing I had ever experienced. What happens is they give you a small dose to see if you can tolerate it, and what that causes is deep relaxation, and you start to kind of lose some coordination, and so you're allowed to kind of watch TV and stuff until it starts to kick in, and you'll know when it's kicking in. So I went directly into my room, and I laid down, and the nurse came in, and she took my blood pressure and asked me how I was doing, and said, okay, it's time for the next dose. And the next dose is like the big dose. So I took that, and I started hearing a really fairly intense buzzing in my ears, which is what everybody experiences with Ibogaine. And as I lay there, I began to kind of go inward into myself. I felt like I was small inside my body. And I began to have this series of rapid thoughts, rapid scenes from my life, and began to see these scenes in a very realistic manner. It was actually really fascinating because it's not like seeing a vision in your mind when you're not doing Ibogaine. It's like you're there. And I was seeing scenes from my childhood where I was really present as a child. I actually had my child mind when I was doing the trip. So it wasn't like I, as a 47-year-old adult, was remembering what it felt like to be a child. I was an 8-year-old child, which was fascinating. And so throughout the period of doing the trip, I went through different things in my life and different eras of my life. I was able to see different things and why they happened and why I made the choices I made, and kind of what it all meant from a very objective perspective. And even in re-experiencing abuse sequences, I want people to understand you don't re-experience them in a way that re-traumatizes you, which is really fascinating because many people who do this for addiction, for instance, don't want to remember some stuff that happened when they were using. I mean, they don't want to remember things that were done to them. They don't want to remember things that they did to others. But understand that you are actually being held in this very loving space that is really hard to explain. But trust me, it's not traumatizing to see those scenes. You do, however, feel intense emotions because you realize what was actually happening. You don't re-experience the emotions you had then so much as you, well, a little bit maybe, but you experience these aha moments, these epiphanies of, oh my gosh, that's what that really meant. Oh my gosh, that's what that other person was feeling in that situation. And oh, this is what I got out of that experience that seemed like it had no point. You know, like the torture was not pointless. It was almost like a class I was taking, and I was able to emerge from the experience with this perspective that allowed me to really understand my inner landscape, myself. Now, when you do Ibogaine, you experience this really weird kind of time flux, I don't know what you'd call it, where a minute can seem like an hour. This can be kind of disturbing because, you know, a lot of times people who are addicted, I understand, go through some physical pain. I didn't have physical pain. I also really listened to the doctors and nurses when they said, when you do Ibogaine, you keep your head straight. You lay there and you just keep it straight. If you move your head side to side when you're doing Ibogaine, you are going to vomit. And there are some people who take flood doses who can't help but thrash, and they do vomit. But I kept myself straight, and I didn't get sick. I tested it once. I said, oh, how, you know, is that really true? And so I kind of went like this, and oh, ugh. Yeah, they were telling the truth. So if you do Ibogaine, keep your head straight. So I kept wondering what time it was because it seemed like I had been in the trip for so long. So when the nurse, Zama, who's wonderful, came in and took my blood pressure, I said, what time is it? It must be, you know, early morning by now, because I had started tripping at like, I don't know, 7 p.m. And she said, oh, it's 10 o'clock in the evening. And I thought, oh, how am I ever going to make it through this? Because it seemed like forever. And there are people who think they're in it for months when they're in it for, you know, 24 hours. It's just part of how Ibogaine works. It unpacks your brain and reassembles it and puts it back together. And when you're undergoing this, you really return to an infant-like state. And I really mean that. You can't even really sit up by yourself. If you have to go to the bathroom, the nurses have to help you, and you literally shuffle. Those of you who are old enough to remember the Tim Conway thing on Carol Burnett when he did the little old man that would shuffle, that's how you have to walk, and that is hard to do. And so going to the bathroom was really an experience. And you're in a dark room because light is not your friend when you're doing Ibogaine. You see light do very weird things, shimmers, and it's not scary, but it's just overwhelming. So like you don't want light to be part of your experience. So obviously you have to turn the light on in the bathroom to go to the bathroom, but you know, it's a real adventure to try to get yourself to like sit on the toilet and stuff. But they help you, you know, so then you go back to bed, and you know, as the trip progresses, it goes through different stages, and so the visions kind of slow down a bit, and then you start to have a reflective period. And at the end of my trip, it was very interesting. I started to empathize with my abuser. Now understand, I had done a lot of work understanding what makes a person harm another so horrifically. But I had done a lot of work sympathizing with my abuser, but I actually empathized with him in a very constructive way. And so I was sitting up, I managed to sit up in the bed somehow by myself, and I believed my abuser was in the room with me, and I was talking to him about how I understood what it was like to be him. And I really believed he was there. And the nurse came in because there's a camera in the room. They have cameras in all the rooms so that they can watch you, and if you start to freak out or whatever, they can, you know, come in. She checked on me and she's like, "Hi, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm sorry, I'm still tripping." She's like, "Okay, lay back down, you're fine." And you know, towards morning, I started to come back to myself, and I started to just kind of reassimilate, and I felt very calm. I thought I could get up, and I tried, and bad plan. So I laid back down, and I started to feel hungry and that kind of thing. So eventually, when I just kind of became able to feel like my fingers would work and my toes would work and my arms and legs would work, I started to tentatively sit up, and everything was very bright. Everything was really, I felt this real sense of calm and beauty and joyfulness and serenity. And I was able to get up and take a shower. And you're gonna want to take a shower. You sweat. Some people do vomit on themselves. Some people even urinate on themselves if they're doing flood doses and they're way out there in some other sphere. But for me, because I didn't do a flood dose, because PTSD doesn't necessarily require that, I was able to get up, take a shower, go out, eat breakfast. I was starving. Some people aren't. Some people can't eat for a minute. But I was hungry, and I ate, and I kept it all down. It was great. And I went and sat outside, and I was just feeling so good. And there was a real paradigm shift in the way my mind worked, which is with me today. Doing Ibogaine has changed me in what feels like a permanent way. There are things that I feel comfortable with now that I wasn't comfortable with before. I am less likely to trigger. I do still occasionally have a trigger, but it's so rare. And my capacity for joy is greatly increased. There was programming at Minds Alive as well, and you know, most of it was kind of geared toward the young male addict because that's their target market there. But I still found a lot of benefit to not only getting to know the other people, all of whom were coming off drugs and who were really cool people, sweet young men, but I got benefit from having Reiki. I got a great benefit from doing the yoga directly after I tripped. That was great. And I spoke with a counselor twice. I spoke with a counselor individually. Actually, no, 3 times, because I did group therapy and I did individual counseling twice, which really helped me kind of process everything. And they took us out and we had a massage at a lovely bed and breakfast, because that's kind of how it's done in Durban. They don't have like massage places. It's part of a whole experience. And so there was a spa in one of the bed and breakfast places nearby, and we went and had a lovely hot stone massage. So great. We went, saw the Indian Ocean, and that was lovely. And the entire experience was just really, it was personable, it was comfortable. The people who worked at the center, down to the people who cleaned the rooms, I mean, everybody was so nice. The people who cooked were so nice. It was just fabulous. and I feel changed. I feel really changed, and I feel better for the experience. And so if you're considering, if you're doing research right now about Ibogaine, obviously you need to do a lot more research than just watching my video and listening to me. But I hope that kind of clarifies some things. There have been some people who I've dealt with on some blogs who truly, just because they're saturated with another mindset, I guess, believe that those of us who are talking about Ibogaine are kind of trying to get people into some kind of. I've literally had people say the word cult, and I'm like, whoa, cult? Okay. No, we go, we pay, we leave. There is no further contact. There is no, we're on fire for this because it worked, and there's not any sort of financial type, ongoing draining of our resources or anything like that. And they just basically like, you're done when you're done. But continue to do your research. I hope that this has been helpful for you. I'd love to see more people get help with their PTSD, OCD, that type of thing with Ibogaine, because it sure as heck worked for me. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.